So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example.
And that was Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, making his inaugural address here in Washington, D.C. on January 20th. Hello, I'm Haydé Adams FitzPatrick, and welcome to this special edition of Our Voices as we look at the work ahead for the new Biden-Harris administration. At his inauguration, President Biden laid out his vision to lead America through multiple national crises. What are those challenges? What will he do to meet them? And is he the right man for the moment? VOA's Carolyn Presutti has more.
It took 4 days of uncertain election results until Joe Biden could announce this.
The people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory.
Donald Trump would continue to question the results, rallying his supporters in what ultimately led to a riot at the U.S. Capitol. In that same spot, exactly 2 weeks later, President Joe Biden
Joseph Robinette Biden
was inaugurated amid unprecedented challenges.
To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity.
He's got a huge mess to clean up. I'm not sure that he can do all that he promises.
I don't know. He has a huge feat in front of him. Absolutely.
The same day he took office, the new president signed a flurry of executive orders, overturning Trump administration policies. He rejoined the Paris Climate Accords.
Mr. President.
He sent an immigration proposal to Congress, creating a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. He promised to vaccinate 100 million people against the coronavirus during his first 100 days. And he added this.
One of our 100-day challenges is asking the American people to mask up.
Biden has held elective office for nearly 50 years. He spent 2 terms as President Barack Obama's vice president and is known for his ability to get bipartisanship cooperation in Congress.
I know how to make government work.
He solidified his skills and connections during his 6 terms in the U.S. Senate. But tragedy struck a month after his first election in 1972. His wife and baby daughter were killed in a car crash. His 2 young sons, Beau and Hunter, badly injured. Back then, Senator Biden would ride the Amtrak train 90 minutes from Washington to Delaware each night to be with his sons. Those deep ties to Delaware were evident in a rare sentimental moment as he said goodbye on his way to the White House.
You know, it's kind of emotional for me. But look, you were with me my whole career, and through the good times and the bad.
Son Beau died of brain cancer in 2015. Biden himself has had 2 brain surgeries to repair aneurysms. He and his wife Jill, a college professor, have homes in Wilmington and Rehoboth, Delaware. Daughter Ashley was born in 1981. Residents in Wilmington call the president their hometown boy, who likes milkshakes and cheesesteaks. Bob Byrd often sees Biden behind the wheel of his convertible 1967 sports car.
He's got a vintage Corvette, and you'll see him driving it around every now and then. Yes, he does like to drive.
Now, at age 78, he becomes the oldest president ever elected, as he readies for his toughest political challenge yet, steering a divided nation into the future. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
Well, now for more on what we can expect to top the new Biden-Harris administration's agenda, I spoke to VOA's White House correspondent, Patsy Widakuswara.
The immediate concern right now is getting the pandemic under control. You know, this is something that the administration is very much concerned about. they promised 100 million shots of vaccinations within 100 days, the first 100 days, getting all sorts of, opening support to open schools, mask mandate for federal buildings, and so on, as well as trying to get the support needed for the pandemic relief. This is the second big package, stimulus package that's now being debated in Congress. So definitely for the first 100 days, the focus is on domestic in terms of containing COVID, but that also translates to the external cooperation with the rest of the world. As you know, we have again now rejoined the World Health Organization. President Trump took us out of the World Health Organization at the height of the pandemic. The Biden administration revoked that with an executive order on the first day, as well as joining COVAX. This is like the global initiative to ensure that countries who are getting the vaccines are not just rich countries, but also middle-income countries.
Now, of course, Patsy, in terms of America's changing its tune on the international stage, now it seems we've gone from America first to America's back. What's the takeaway here for the international community?
Right. So right now we're beginning to see the details and the contours of what kind of foreign policy the Biden administration will have, right? We're still listening to the details. There's not been much put out on issues such as whether they want more countries to sign up on the Abraham Accords, for example, whether they want to continue this tariff war with China, for example. However, the tone has very much changed. I mean, we remember under the Trump administration, it was always America first. Now, the Biden administration is very much pushing this idea of multilateralism, of working together with allies, of working together with groups of countries, whether it through NATO or the UN or, with ASEAN, with the African Union. All sorts of this regional and international cooperation will be very important for the Biden administration. And that's what they say. That's how they're going to approach these problems. Whether or not it will succeed, again, we will see what happens. Definitely, there's been a lot of welcoming notes from allies, whether it's Europe, Asia, and Africa as well. So certainly a different tone, but how effective it is also is remaining to be seen.
And that was VOA's Patsy Widakuswara speaking to me here in Washington. So what do African nations want to see from the new administration? We reached out to Kenya's former ambassador to the United States, Elkanah Odembo, and asked how he thinks America should engage Africa.
I think one of the things that this new administration can do with regard to its relationship with the continent is to reach out and establish what the continent, especially in the context of the Continental Free Trade Area, what does Africa want to do with the world in terms of trading? What does Africa want to do with the United States? What are the opportunities that Africa presents to the United States? The United States must pay attention to what exists on this continent as opportunities for them. They have a lot of catching up to do. The Chinese, for example, all over the continent investing heavily, particularly in infrastructure. The United States must then also decide, and changes are already beginning to happen. We can see how the US is paying much more attention now towards issues of investment and trade.
Well, we also asked the people on the streets of the cities across the continent what they would like to see from the Biden-Harris administration.
Many things are expected from the new president. We want him to bring reforms. As you know, we are going through very difficult times. So we want him to first reverse the travel ban imposed on Muslim countries. We had tough times with the previous administration, and we expect the new administration to change the course and open up.
I'm really happy and looking forward to this new beginning, particularly with a female vice president, Madam Kamala Harris. And I'm looking forward to what she can bring to the table. I'm sure she's the first, but she will not be the last. So I'm excited about the future of females and what females can bring to the table.
Africa can profit from the trade policies that Joe Biden is proposing. We know that countries that have huge debt from China are from Africa. Biden is saying there should be fair trade, and he's taking this approach as an international approach. and is asking other countries to pressure China to have fair trade practices, and that's applying the loans that African countries took from China. So we are expecting a new approach in Biden administration.
We have seen the level of racism in the United States after the death of George Floyd. Hopefully, the new president will be able to work on that, fight racism, but also help the integration of young immigrants from Africa into American society.
I'm expecting a lot of change. I'm expecting equality and for the economy to also grow as well in America.
I think the nomination of Joe Biden will be much more important for multilateral cooperation with Europe, Russia, and Africa. I think African countries will benefit more, and we will see a change in global geopolitics this year.
Well, still to come here on Our Voices, we'll take a closer look at some of the most prominent women in the Biden administration and what their appointments mean for people in America and around the world. We'll be right back.
The Biden administration has vowed to make immigration a priority, in particular to create a pathway to permanent residency and ultimately citizenship for DACA and TPS recipients in this country.
Because the health security of Americans is connected with that of Africans, it is also our hope that we will cooperate with one another to make sure that vaccine is made available for Americans and for Africans in our efforts to end this pandemic.
Welcome back to Our Voices. Young girls are often told, if you can see it, you can be it. So when Kamala Harris stepped into her role as Vice President of the United States, she also stepped into the history books, breaking gender, racial and cultural barriers. As Catherine Gibson reports, Harris is no stranger to historic firsts.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
A history-making moment in the United States.
So help me God.
As former Senator Kamala Harris becomes the nation's first female vice president.
It is my honor to be here, to stand on the shoulders of those who came before.
The 56-year-old Harris getting right to work alongside President Joe Biden and serving in one of her most important roles as the tie-breaking vote in a Democratic majority U.S. Senate. Harris also is the first Indian American and Black person to serve as vice president. Analysts say her rise sends a powerful message.
Never in the executive branch have we had a woman vice president and still not president. But not only that, but to have a woman of color, a woman from immigrant parents who came to this country for a better life.
The daughter of an Indian mother and a Jamaican father, Harris grew up in Oakland, California. A mural of her now on the school she was bused to as a child as part of racial integration efforts.
She's broken so many glass ceilings for so many women.
A graduate of Howard University, an all-Black college in Washington, D.C., Harris became the first Black female San Francisco prosecutor beginning in 2004, and then California Attorney General in 2010.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up!
During Black Lives Matter protests this summer, some progressives complained Harris had been a much tougher prosecutor than she let on, took contradictory positions on the death penalty, and failed to hold police accountable for misconduct.
This is a moment in time that is requiring us to fight.
Harris first made history in California when she was elected to the U.S. Senate.
It's important that people see people in power that look like themselves.
Harris, who speaks often about her role as an aunt and a stepmother, is married to lawyer Doug Emhoff, who will now be the second gentleman, an entirely new position in White House history. And while the most important job for a vice president is to be ready to step in for the president if needed, Analysts say Harris may also make use of her historic firsts.
She can be a stateswoman representing the United States, but I think she'll travel around the United States as well to show that symbolism of what she's doing.
A new global role in the White House, celebrated halfway around the world in her ancestral village in India. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Well, another high-profile woman we'll be seeing more of on the international stage is Linda Thomas Greenfield. The longtime diplomat has been tapped to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Within hours of taking office, President Biden rejoined the Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization. But after 4 years of Donald Trump's America First policy, how will the U.S. re-engage the international community? Our UN correspondent, Margaret Bashir, is in New York with more.
Ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table. Ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies. Ready to stand up for our values.
At the United Nations, the Trump administration has slashed hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to programs, including peacekeeping missions, Palestinian refugees, and for women's reproductive health. Biden could win some international goodwill by quickly undoing some of Trump's policies. Experts say UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will likely have more latitude with the new U.S. administration.
I think we're going to see Guterres laying out some pretty ambitious plans in the year ahead on how to fight climate change and how to fight inequality, because in a sense he's liberated to promote ambitious ideas for international cooperation after a period in which he had to be enormously cautious to avoid offending Trump.
Biden's nominee to be UN ambassador and member of his cabinet is career diplomat Linda Thomas Greenfield.
America is back. Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back.
Diplomats have publicly and privately welcomed her nomination.
We think that should bring to bear her vast experience, over 3 decades of diplomacy. And that's when we need it now. Now we need diplomatic skills, maturity, and knowing that we have a common cause, all of us.
Whether to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal will quickly test the new administration.
The president-elect recognizes that this is going to be a tough road ahead. If Iran were to enter into strict compliance with the 2015 deal, then the U.S. will rejoin the deal, but only as the beginning of follow-on negotiations. And that's where the difficulties are going to come.
At the United Nations, China moved to expand its influence as the Trump administration pulled back.
Biden, I think, will want to limit Chinese influence, but does know that in some ways it's necessary to work with Beijing.
Both allies and adversaries are eager to see how Biden and his UN envoy will translate this new U.S. leadership at the United Nations. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, New York.
Well, after the break, we'll stick with history-making stories. What Joe Biden's cabinet pick of this woman means for America's indigenous people. We'll also speak to an expert about confronting the U.S. government's complicated history and tense relationship with its First Peoples. We'll be back in a moment. You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. She says a voice like hers has never been part of any U.S. president's cabinet. When Joe Biden tapped U.S. Congresswoman Deb Haaland to be the head of the Interior Department, there was celebration from the descendants of America's first people. Haaland will now head a department that has shaped the lives of Native Americans for generations. It oversees about 500 million acres of public land and policies affecting tribal governments. Earlier I spoke to Professor Anton Troyer. He teaches Ojibwe, his tribal language, its history and culture at Bemidji State University in Minnesota. I asked him what this moment means for America's Indigenous people.
The relationship between Indigenous people and the United States government has been complex, strained, and tense a lot of the time, and I think often misunderstood. So having an Indigenous voice who's really well informed on our issues, authentically comes from one of our communities, that will be part of that conversation, will really improve things. I think so often on the policy front, we have been imagined without being well understood. And I do think that her appointment will really have a positive impact. And there are lots of policy issues that she'll be weighing in on that I think will be impacted for the better. America's had a really tough time grappling with its history. We message people about scattered bands of roaming nomads in the wilderness, and it's just not accurate. And I think one of the reasons we provide that message is to say it was sparsely populated, so there was room for everybody else who came. And we avoid dealing with the fact that everyone else's coming was a taking from Indigenous people. There's no way around it, but genocide is at the start of the American experience. And our treatment of many different racial minority groups, the transatlantic slave trade and our treatment of Black people in America, these things are morally repugnant. We'll say, yeah, there was slavery, but we got an Emancipation Proclamation. How about Abraham Lincoln? We'll say, yeah, there was a little Jim Crow, but Martin Luther King, he speaks for all of us, you know? And with the Native experience, you know, you think about the things that prop up the narrative of American exceptionalism. What did we get right? And there's usually crickets. Or maybe we'll say, you know, well, Thanksgiving. Truth and reconciliation starts with truth. What I mean by that is we can't get to reconciled and skip all the reconciling. We can't get to healed and skip all the healing. So I think Desmond Tutu, for example, provides a really great example in his book on forgiving, when he says when there is an injury between two human beings or, you know, a historical injustice, you have to tell the story. And you have to name the hurt. And then you can work on forgiveness, and then you can renew or release that relationship. And America still stymies an effort to even tell the story. And I think that's why the truth-telling is so important.
And that was Professor Anton Troyer from Bemidji State University in Minnesota. He is the author of several books, including The Language Warrior's Manifesto, How to Keep Our Languages Alive No Matter the Odds. And that is our show for this week. We leave you with the words of Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman, who captured the nation and the world's attention with a powerful poem at President Biden's inauguration. Here she is with The Hill We Climb. Until next time, goodbye.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.